especial que se quedan pues en caso de que haya algún incidente en que una persona siente que tiene temor por su vida, ¿cierto? Si no,
yes, so, and I wanted to say, we will get started very soon, but at the end of the talk, feel free to ask me questions more about the case. I tried to narrow it down. Feel free to ask me questions about writing, maybe some of you are writers, or about the history, or about Ohio, to tell you what.
lots of topics. Well, let's get started then. I apologize for a little bit late. Another teacher, Marie Oliver, is supposed to come in her group, but she's not here, so we're going to get started. Hello, Maria. Welcome. So I'd like to welcome this afternoon Dr. Susan Unviruous. Did I say that right?
Yes,
Unviruous. And she's an American academic, gender consultant, and writer from Ohio. She's currently living in Bogota. How long have you been living in Ohio?
since June. I visited about 5 times since
Exactly.
2020.
She's won a number of prizes that I'm not going to go over in detail, but if you're interested and curious, we're going to share with you the website where you can find all her poetry. And what's very interesting, and we're very grateful to have you here with us today, Suzanne, is the interconnection and all the different topics that we're going to look at. As she has said, we're going to look at gender, domestic violence, Ohio, law, poetry, history, lots of different, elements come into play. So, without any further ado, I'm not going to read through the whole bio, but I welcome you to Externado University. This is a group of students that is currently learning English or improving. They're learning English and know English. They're improving their English day to day. They're level 5 of 6 levels of English. And we're really happy to have you here and welcome you to this space. So thank you very much, Susan. Go ahead and get started.
Thank you. So, I am from Ohio, and this is my book, Death of an Unvirtuous Woman. It's my second book of poetry. This is my first book, Passion Seeds, which does not deal with violence but love. So, Death of an Unvirtuous Woman takes place in Ohio, and I am from Ohio. This is Ohio here. So it's a northern state on the border with Canada. Right? And here's Lake Erie. I am from near Cleveland. So the capital is Columbus. And can I have you stand up?
Yeah, great.
So Hannah has a shirt, Ohio Columbus. So Columbus is the capital of my state. I live near Cleveland. And today we are going to travel to around Bowling Green. And we're going to time travel to 1881. Okay? So Bowling Green today in car is about a 2.5-hour drive from Cleveland. And we will talk about domestic violence today. Domestic violence and domestic homicide, which is murder when a partner murders their partner. There's still major problems today. Worldwide, 137 women are killed every day. And that is 47,000 women killed every year by their spouse, their boyfriend, or a family member, according to the UN. Domestic violence, we think, well, why doesn't someone just leave the first time they're hit? It takes an average of 7 times for a victim to leave the situation. And I will say mainly women, because women make up 84% of the victims. Men are victims. There's also domestic violence in same-sex relationships. Domestic violence is caused by a number of factors. So it ranges from outside pressures, economic pressures, internal pressures, gender role pressures in society, expectations for the gender roles, mental health issues, financial issues, relationship issues, social pressures, and homesickness. Now this couple I'm going to tell you about today, Mary and Although there were a lot of German immigrants to Ohio, it's hard when you leave your country. So that I factored in as one of the stressors. And another stressor that probably is shocking you is pregnancy. And pregnancy is one of the major causes of death for pregnant, or not, sorry, yeah, pregnant, well, murder, homicide, domestic homicide is the major killer of pregnant women. So I'm going to begin with two simple poems, and when I say in terms of language, that begin with the heart of domestic violence and the issues involving safety and money. Because financial worries and lack of financial, and I'm sorry you don't have a copy of this one, but it's pretty simple. I'll let you know when we have copies. So this is a stressor is when there are financial problems and that presses people to stay in the relationship. It doesn't make it easy to leave. So these two poems tell about those stressors. And the first poem is called Action Tells the Story. And there's a word I'd like to tell you to know in this poem. It's called the word warren. Warren means a home for a bunny or a rabbit. So we say a bunny lives in a warren. Okay? And another word for this first poem is gasp. It's a gasp. This poem is about envisioning Mary fleeing to a neighbor's house for safety, which did happen one time, and the neighbor let her in, but then her husband didn't like it, and she was not allowed to let Mary stay there for other nights. Action tells the story. Fleeing him through fields, under clouds, breathless, knock, knock, in the night. Door opens, she tumbles inside. Soup, touch, bolted oak door, a neighbor's house, her warm. Gasping, gasping, for children alone, ashes, a heart, an empty side, a natural room. The second poem deals with possessions, material things, and how those give us the power and confidence to go and do things. One word I think is helpful in this poem is cellar, which means a basement, underground, cellar. Possessions tell the story. 5 pigs, 1 cow, 8 chickens, 1 rooster, cried. 10 sacks of potatoes, with the secret cellar wall, survived. So this is also a story of female resistance, and we're going to focus on domestic violence and female resistance, victim blaming, media pressures, community, and our words was sensational and gruesome. Sensational is where we have a lot of attention to something and interest, and it draws a lot of likes, and gruesome is something that's a horror. Ooh, gruesome. The title of the book, Death of an Unvirtuous Woman, is a pushback at the victim blaming of Mary Bob from 1881 to 1880. What is victim blaming? So victim blaming is saying or implying that the victim, the harmed or wounded person, is responsible for what happened to them. I'll give a very brief example, such as if someone was raped, yes, raped, and you say, were you drinking? That's victim blaming. It's implying, oh, it's your fault. If you had not been drinking, you would not have been raped. Okay? And,
Sorry, you know the word rape?
yes, we thank you. So, 3 words framed Mary Bach as an unworthy woman. 3 words victim blamed Mary Bach in the newspaper that was printed in Bowling Green, Ohio, 1881. There was one journalist in particular in the town there who victim blamed Mary Bach. And the title of my book then, Death of an women should be weak, quiet, that they don't deserve protection. So if women go outside of how a woman should be, then, oh, they're not supposed to be protected. And this is a challenge in the title to the victim blaming that happened to Mary Bach. And my project in the book brings in the sexist, discriminatory voice and the sensational voice in order to critique them. Because these things are still happening today. If we look at how Hillary Clinton has been portrayed in the media, their focus on her hair, right? She's not pretty enough. Oh, she's got wrinkles. And we will see very similar problems with the newspaper representation of Mary Bach. So I first encountered the story when I was studying in Bowling Green for my master's in poetry. And this is the current exhibit, Mary and Carl Bach. So the artifacts and the story engrossed me. They really interested me a lot to engross me. These are the artifacts. This is the rope that hung Carl Bach. This is the knife somewhere that he killed with, his Bible, his cup, and Mary's fingers, her cut-off fingers from 1881 that were preserved in whiskey. Okay, so I was engrossed with that. Also, what interested me was the 1883 newspaper article. And it was, in 1880s, the newspapers were really big. They were very long and wide, and the print was so small. And I stopped and I was reading the paper, no one else was in the museum. And I came across 3 words: termagant, virago, and slattery. I had no idea what they were. I'm a poet, I love words, I wrote them down, I went home, I looked them up. And the definitions are all negative about women. And so, termagant is a noun, an overbearing, harsh-tempered, or nagging woman. Virago, a loud, domineering, violent, overbearing woman. A female warrior. This, though, female warrior definition was popular maybe 300 to 500 years ago. About 300 years ago, it changed to being mainly defined as negative. Slattery, of a woman or her character, appearance, dirty and untidy. These 3 words appeared in the newspaper article, and I realized, oh, she's being victimized. She's being framed as a bad woman, and somehow implying she deserved to be murdered. She was not nice. She wasn't worth the consideration. So you have a copy of The Power of the Pen. And it's a very short poem. You can look then in Spanish because there are some words that are specific. And in this poem, I look at how Mary was murdered 2 times. Her husband murdered her. And then the newspaper, the journalist, murdered her in printing the story and negatively talking about her. The power of the pen. Mary was 3 words: termagant, virago, and slattery. The 10-inch long horn knife delivered her to the tar of words slated for women. And those words turned Mary into pure pulp. So pulp is the material we make paper from. She was murdered 2 times in my view. I could feel her death reading that newspaper article. So these words tell us how women are supposed to be according to society. Women are not supposed to be overbearing. They're supposed to be quiet. Women are not supposed to be dominant or loud. They're not supposed to be slatternly, right? Especially little girls, right? You watch a 2-year-old and how the parents will act if the girl is getting dirty. Be clean, right? Stay nice and tidy. Contemporary feminist writer Lana Elthway, in The 7 Necessary Sins for Women and Girls, explains that being one's authentic self, being real, is that which most challenges the patriarchy. That is, a woman owning her voice and her life and publicly speaking about it, what she wants, and publicly speaking about problems. Doing that threatens the patriarchy. And Mary Bach, for sure, challenged the patriarchy. She did not want the abuse from her husband, and she also used the law to assert her protection. So she was in the public sphere very much. The next poem, Notice, so if you take out Notice, and you might look at the Spanish verse. Notice pushes back on victim blaming, and it looks at society's stereotypes of masculinity and femininity. And it opens in the book, it's the second poem in the book, by shocking. And in order to confront the sensational way this case has been portrayed for 150 years. And by sensational, I mean the attention given to the murder and hanging. So the poem's called Notice, or the Spanish is Aviso. Aviso. So maybe I suggest you read it in Spanish first, and if you don't have a copy, raise your hand. Aviso. Does everybody have a copy? The Spanish, okay, great. So take a look at the Spanish version, and if you don't have it, just raise your hand. Aviso. So this is probably one of the most shocking poems in the book. How many of you are familiar with the Wild West and cowboys? Right, okay. And you're somewhat familiar with wanted ads? When you're looking for somebody who maybe did something and they put an ad out, wanted. So this poem took the form of a wanted ad. A fellow poet suggested that I try different forms for the poems. And I thought, okay, I'm going to try this, a wanted ad. And I envisioned, what if Mary Bach was wanted? Because I envisioned there was a lot of hatred towards her for doing things that were not acceptable in that era for women. Okay. So I'll give you a, or would you like to read it in Spanish? So I think this one, we won't read the others, but I think this is sort of a difficult. And I'll add with the translation, this one is not literal. It was too hard to, so it was better just to get the idea. So for example, the animal is Wolverine, and we change that to Urso. Okay, please. Okay.
Cinco pozos petroleros y continuas mamadas en tu pollo. Si la tarea aquí callar sin que oponga resistencia a una salud machista con más de 5 días para la captura de una mujer que se llama Mary Elizabeth, conocida como el alias de la osa de Turan. Mujer de estatura considerable, hombros anchos, capaces, cada uno de cargar 2 cubos de agua, desaliñada, uñas llenas de tierra, ojos azules, mirada furiosa. ¿No?
Sí,
Okay. Cuidado. Tiene boca con sabor a miel, que parece jugosa, suave, pero puede destrozar a sus víctimas con sus grandes espinas. Su mirada es capaz de sí, los campos de maíz. Se derivas inmediatamente de la oficina del buscar por descabacer la virilidad de su esposo delante de todos los habitantes de Wilton, Ohio, 22 de julio de 1880.
Thank you. And the last, and I'll draw an eye here, the last line in English is pickled. And pickled is when you ferment, like cucumbers.
Yep. And we had pickles, for example, like a hamburger. Yes. Cucumbers that are fermented. You don't need a lot of pickles for them.
Okay, so this is an example where there's a drastic difference from the translation, but you get a sort of a sense. And so I will read this in English to you, and then we'll listen to an actor presenting it. So notice, reward of 5 oil wells and continual mouths on your dick. It brought in silent and limp like green onions, 5 days old. For the apprehension of one Mary Elizabeth Bach, alias Thunder Wolverine, woman of sizable stature, wide shoulders, capable of hauling 2 water-filled buckets each. Unkempt, fingernails filled with dirt, stern blue eyes. Beware, his honey locust mouth that looks and smells sweet, but can shred with its thorns. She is capable of withering all of your acres of corn with one sole stare. If you see her, go straight to Sheriff Reed. Wanted for pickling her husband's manhood for all of Milton Center to see, read, and hear. July 22nd, 1881. So this is the sheriff speaking in the poem. This is the poem performed in Cleveland last year. It was like a 10-minute play.
The sheriff. Reward! 5 oil wells and continual mouths on your dick. It brought in silent and lived like green onions 5 days old. The apprehension of one Mary Elizabeth Bach, a.k.a. Thunder Wolverine, woman of sizable stature, wide shoulders, capable of carrying 2 water-filled buckets each. Unkempt, fingernails full of dirt, stern blue eyes. Beware the onion of this mouth that looks and smells sweet, but can shred with its thick thorns. She is considered capable of withering all your fields of corn with one sole stare. If you see her, come straight to Sheriff Reed. Wanted for pickling her husband's manhood for all Milton Center to see, read, and hear. July 22nd, 1881. Mary's Way.
Okay, this is Mary Bach. And as I said, they were German immigrants. They met and married in Cleveland, Ohio. And then 3 years later, they moved to Milton Center where they co-bought land. And Milton Center was a rural area in the countryside. Mary Elizabeth Bach was born in 1844 in Germany. She came over to America as a child, okay, with her family. She first married a German who went into the Union Army to fight for the Civil War. Her husband was presumed dead because he never came back, the first husband. So she got what's called a widow's pension. She got money from the government because her husband died. So she had money. Now Carl came over to the U.S. when he was about 25 years old. Okay? And he was also 14 years older than Mary. He seems to have spoken broken English because in the newspaper, his quotes have things where the subject and verb don't match up. You can see, or I was able to deduce, a difference between their education. Mary Bach must have spoken English much better than Carl. And look, she knew the laws. How many women at that about filing for divorce and restraining order. So the fact that she was able to do those things, to file them, is really remarkably noteworthy. They had 3 children together, Carl, Marie, and Catherine. And at the time of the murder, Mary was 7 months pregnant with her 4th child. I'm going to read you a poem about the murder. You don't have a copy, but it's in pretty simple language. In the poem, you can hear Carl's broken English. He says, "Put me to jail." Take me to jail, you would normally say. And this poem is what's called a found poem. A found poem is when you have something here and you erase parts of it. So in this poem, I used the actual 1883 newspaper article, a paragraph or several paragraphs, and I erased parts of it. And you can see how it is erased here. So the idea of this type of poem is that you are highlighting what's most important. And you're leaving moments for the reader to pause and consider. It's called Carl Bach, His History and Crime Retold. A sorrowful chapter account of the trial and execution. On the morning on the 11th day of October 1881, came into Bowling Green, parcel in his hand, staring about bewildered sort of way, as if he might be a stranger or was looking for someone. Addressed himself to Sheriff T.C. Reed in rather broken English. "I want to go to jail." Mr. Reed looked at him closely. His eyes, bloodshot and red, shone with an unnatural light and betrayed great emotion and a desperate state of mind. His whole appearance denoted painful agitation. "Have you been having more trouble with the old woman?" "Yes, bad trouble," said he. "Have you been whipping her again?" said the sheriff. "Yes, I whipped her dead." "Great God, no! Killed your wife?" "Yes." "I want to go to jail." Staring, crying, "How did you kill her?" asked Mr. Reed. "With the corn cutter." "Where is she?" "In the house." "Now, is it likely she is not hurt as bad as you think?" Here again he sobbed, incoherently said, "She is dead, Sheriff. Put me in jail." He carried some old deeds and papers. Examining articles from him, locked him in jail, a perplexed state of mind. The man was Carl Bach, a German, 57 years of age, resident of this country about 22 years. So Mary really resisted. She, early on in the marriage, she wanted a divorce. When she was in Cleveland, her husband had started beating her up, and she wanted a divorce, but her brother said, "No, just stay." She had pressure from her family. So she filed, at the height of the problem that we're looking at in this case, a peace warrant. What today in America we call a restraining order. So if you hit somebody, you can go to court and get a protection, so that person has to stay away from you. Yes? Now I have to say today, it's really not, it's hard. You can get a lot of restraining orders, and many women who get them, they still end up being murdered by their spouse, their boyfriend. Because why? The police aren't there outside your door protecting you. But it is at least some protection. Legally, you're supposed to say how many feet away from somebody. So even in 1881, there was this law. I was really surprised to know this. Also, before she filed the restraining order, she refused to sell her house and land co-bought and co-owned with her husband. So she owned half of the house and the land, and her husband wanted to sell it. He would beat her up to try to force her to sell, and she said no. She also then filed for divorce and the custody She told her husband, "You cannot move back into the house." Even though there was the restraining order, he moved into the bar. He was on the property. The judge told him, "Look, you should seek accommodations elsewhere." He didn't listen. In part of my work, I imagine, what did the people say in town about Mary Locke? And this poem that I'm going to read to you, called Five Set of Eyes, deals with gossip in town, representation of women, and the interpretations of Mary. There are 5 voices in the poem. 5 sets of eyes on Mrs. Locke. That woman was not a woman quite. She was harsh, gruff, with a deep voice and a bristle. Her stride was large, like a stilt walker. She stood with her feet wide enough that a barrel could be between. God bless the children. Give them strength, waiting for the burden. The lilies of the valley are on the hill by the cemetery. Peace, little ones. Our Father in heaven knows you have a hard burden to bear. I could hear her that day walking by the attorneys. It was pouring, but she said loud, like an axe being ground. The window was closed. "Carl, you must pay for the children. You cannot take half." She got mad fast. I knew she was going to speak when she made a fist, gathering all her points inside. Then thought he was going to hear what he didn't want to hear. So I went to the cows or pigs. Their sounds were like a brook calming me from the storm of my house. She worked hard. Every time I came their way, she was either in the field with the cows or the pigs, with the children, or in the kitchen. I never saw her just sitting with a cordial in a rocker under the tree or kneeled down reverently in prayer. And this one I forgot to tell you, I didn't bring a copy or a translation of that poem. Now, Bach maintained that he did not premeditate this. He did not plan the murder. He tried to elicit sympathy for himself in a variety of ways. And one of those ways is he said his wife made him angry. So as to victim blaming, "Oh, because she made me angry, I'm justified in hitting her and killing her." So he even said this in court testimony, that she made him angry and that he just wanted to whip her, he didn't intend to kill her. I'm going to read to you Lightning Shift of Narrative. This poem you don't have a copy of, but it's about him saying, "She made me angry." Okay? And there are some German words in the poem. In this book, I weave in some German words and expressions to give a flavor to their background. And one word is meine Frau, my wife, du Arschloch, you asshole, verdammt, damn, geschnittene sheets, like shitted sheets on your bed, klein, small. And 2 words in English are pyre. It rhymes with fire. So think of fire. You'll hear pyre, a fire. And then the very last word is heed, H-E-E-D, and that means to obey. To obey. Lightning shift of narrative. When I grab a stick to lick, I didn't think to kill. You see, meine Frau made a 9-foot high fire in me with her mouth. Du Arschloch, prepare your own verdammt dinner and wash your own geschnittene sheets. When she locked me out of my house, she lit that fire. I blazed and blazed, enraged at being shut out and made so kind. I had to knock her into a woman's place below me. Her husband had to shove her mouth down into the ground so my voice thundered to make her realize it was me, her husband, she must heed. So around the time that Carl murdered Mary, they were having financial problems. They have been having them for several years. They bought what's called bog land, pantanoso, very wet land, yes? And of course, this was bad for crops. Their crops failed for 2 years. They had 2 different loans they took out on the property. So Carl wanted to sell the house and move out west. Out west was where it was happening. People were making money there, being prosperous. And in the newspaper at this time, there would be letters from people out west back to people in the east, published in the newspaper. And this next poem deals with how Carl, probably as a man, felt inadequate. Because for men, one of the things our society very often puts on men is you need to have money. You need to be rich, right? If you don't have money, you're not a real man. And how do we judge money? What type of car, house, clothes you have, right? So in this poem, I envision how Carl maybe felt inferior to the men in his community based on what? His house. Okay? And looking at what other men did in the community. You have a translation of this poem. Okay? It's called They All Passed Me By. So if you want to have a look in Spanish, there. So the poem deals with gender role expectations and the pressures on men. They've all passed me by. And todos me han pasado. See? Todos me han pasado. Does everybody have a copy? Does anyone need a copy? Do you need a copy?
The translation is on the back.
Yes, on the back.
Ay, nos han roto.
This one was, in terms of translation, this was much easier, and I want to thank my boyfriend Juan Carlos, who helped me very much with notice and with Todos Me Han Pasado, and also a Colombian poet I want to put a plug for, who's also living in Cleveland, and her name is Nora Viviana Cardona Nuez, and she just won a couple literary prizes. Her book, Caesura de Sol, just came out. Todos me han pasado. Soy un actor perdido, pequeño, sí pequeño. George es un hombre grande con 5 pozos petroleros. Una persona a quien la gente saluda con mucha alegría. E incluso grita como si lo hubieran visto caer la lluvia después de haber vivido una larga sequía. En todos lados está su marca, en el haste de la bandera, en el campanario del pobre de la iglesia, en la escuela del río rojo, en la factura de médico para la niña Lizzie y en la línea telegráfica de nuestro pueblo. Ezequiel construye los tejados que todos quieren. Nunca deja de tener demanda. Siempre hay ingresos continuos en su mano. Y Samuel, que permitió el logro de la inundación como crédito, ahora le fluye el dinero y las sonrisas. Mira cómo está de enriquecido. Yo me siento pequeño, tan pequeño. Mis campos apenas rindan para darnos de comer hasta marzo. No tengo nada en mi mano después de haber comprado este maldito pleno pantanoso. Y pues donde mejor que puedo hacer es una cabaña de troncos de fuerte y árbol mismo. Cuando Hermúber pasa con sus vidas azoradas, yo cierro mi piel, mi vergüenza, respiro hondo y flojo el pecho y mi digo mal. And thinking about this in English for money, I use the word greenbacks. We were thinking of the word lucas, right? We also have in English the word bucks that refers to an animal. Okay, and I will read to you this poem in English too.
Lucas.
They all passed me by. I'm a failed farmer, small, so small. George is a big man with 5 oil wells, who people greet with great joy and shout like seeing rain after a long drought. Everywhere bears his mark, the flagpole, the church's fine copper steeple, the red brick school, little Lizzie's doctorville, and our town's telegraph line. Ezekiel builds the roads everyone wants. He's never not in demand. There's always a steady income in his hand. And Samuel will let mud from the flood be credit. Now greenbacks and smiles flow in and in. Oh, is he piled high? I am small, So small. My fields barely yield for us to eat till March. I've nothing in my hand because I bought this damn bog land. And so the best I can do is a cabin of logs, cut and notched by myself. When Herr Mueller and his mill clapboards come by, I shut my shade tight, take a deep breath, puff up my chest, and say, "Nein," which means no. I had a friend that said, "Wait, I heard that and I thought the number 9. So, yes. So he clearly, in this poem, suffers from feeling, gee, I don't have enough money. I don't compare to the other men, right? And that's a reality. July 25th, 1881, Carl hit Mary, and she had him arrested in July 25th for assault, and he was put in jail. His friends came and they paid bond. They paid money so he could get out of jail. The judge said, live somewhere else. Carl didn't obey, and he moved into the barn. The day of the murder in October. So in October, it starts to get cold, by the way, in Ohio. July, it's warm. October, it gets cold. And October 10th, 1881, Mary and Carl had been into town to talk with a lawyer, a divorce lawyer. The talk did not go well. Carl stayed out late drinking till 8 or 9 at night, and he was with his 12, 13-year-old son. He was noted as saying he was going to kill his wife. Now, apparently this wasn't unusual because he had been saying it for years, okay? And also he would brag, he would boast, he would proudly say how he beat up his wife. The fact that nobody intervened is what we call lack of bystander intervention. Are you familiar with this word? Okay, so bystander intervention, I think we have on the vocab page there. Bystander intervention. What this means is you observe there's a problem and you act to intervene. You take responsibility and you do something to prevent the problem, to stop the current problem or a potential problem. So this is a common word in America for training on the universities for first-year students, for all students. So for example, we train in bystander intervention, preventing rape, right? Maybe you see there's somebody's taking somebody in an isolated place. You say, ooh, that doesn't look safe. And you go and say, oh, come join us. That's a bystander intervention. Bystander intervention also can be with things such as fighting, domestic violence, rape, racism, so racist comments, and harassment. So it's when you speak up and you do something. You intervene, right? But this didn't happen. For years, he had been saying around town how he beat his wife up, how he was going to kill her. Nobody did anything. Nobody stopped by to say, hey, what's going on? Or, Carl, why don't you live with me? So when Carl came home after he had been drinking, like I said, October, it starts to get cold. Carl's he's angry, and he wants to be where it's, quote, warm. So he takes his 13-year-old son, and he says, let's move my stuff from the barn into the house. Mary was sleeping in bed, and she said, no. They start to fight. He starts to move his stuff into the room adjoining the house, next to the house. Okay? They're fighting, and Carl goes to the barn and grabs the corn knife, which is a 14-inch long knife specifically used for corn. I only saw it the first time in this exhibit. I had no idea what a corn knife was before. He killed his wife, and the scene was horrific. He cut her above the belly. He did not cut the belly. Her fingers were cut off, parts of her hair, her head was hacked. Even the 13-year-old's children's clothes had blood on them. He murdered her in front of the 3 children. So one was 3 years old, 5, and then 12 or 13 years old. Carl then, after he murdered Mary, he put the children back in bed, and the next morning early, he took the children to a neighbor a mile away, said what he did. They didn't believe him. He went then into town, turned himself into the sheriff, as the first poem, the early poem we looked at. In this book, I also look at how did the children the murder. And I have a poem about the children witnessing it, and also a poem that I'll show you that's only 1 minute long about the children in the town, because there was no television. So this was an event that people talked about, they gossiped. And I have a poem that takes what's called a clapping song. Do you have these type of songs as a child? And I used the form of this clapping song. The clapping song originally is Miss Mary Mac, Miss Mary Mac, Mac. And I took that same rhyming scheme, and I had the children talking about the murder. And in the end of the poem, they say, come see Carl Hain, and pay a ticket, for 5 cents, because this actually happened. People paid to see Carl von Hain, and there were 10,000 people that came to see him hang. So we're almost at the end here, and this.
The town's children playing. Mr. Carl bark, bark, bark under key and lock, bark, bark under the sheriff's eye, cause he killed Mrs. Bark, bark, bark. One night he flips, 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 blackberries to jelly, 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 cut her down like a weed, 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 and killed baby in her belly, belly, belly. Over the crowd so dense, 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 and she squatted on the fence, 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 to watch Carl hang, hang, hang. Gets your 5 cents, cents, cents.
So again, I'm thinking how this was really the talk of the town, so to say. And the last poem I'm going to, the second to last poem I'm going to read to you is the second last poem in the book. And it talks about the lack of bystander intervention as one of the aspects. And it also includes how the children witnessed the murder. And it includes the voice of Mary, who, a part of it, critiquing Carl. Right? So it's not a black and white story. And I show how there are different perspectives and okay. Silence, her throat. And you don't have a copy of this, but silence, her throat. He grabbed, then lit for the barn. Returned not with a stick. There the apple tree stood. You are going to go, not me. There Mary, with her blanket over her eyes, wet herself. He shoved his wife like he shoved the slow cow inside the barn. Her cheek, never on a pillow more than 5 hours, he sliced clear to her ear that had caught the baby's phlegm coughs. He flayed her strong voice that called dinner 5 times to the farthest field to a whimper. He gorged her clucks. Not enough money to go to the fair this year. Not enough money for a trip to Cleveland. Not enough money to buy a new wagon. And flung them on the bedroom wall. There, Katie backed against the hearth, along with a tuft of snarled hair. Slovenly, he thrust through and through, trenched out the roses she never knew. The termagant and virago varnished the walls, mirror, floor, and doors with her blood. Air flooded in, filled his lungs. Quiet. Little Carl wore his mother's blood, her blood that gave 4 lives. A willow split by lightning. The door didn't protect her. The peace ward didn't protect her. Her own son didn't protect her. The 50-ear static in Milton Center that had heard Carl's crisp death threats didn't protect her. The smoldering strikes silence, stillness, and we remember just a moment before it scavenged the ground. I'm going to take you quickly back to the museum, and in 2015, the museum closed the exhibit on Carl, of Carl Nerida. And I told you they have the 3 fingers preserved. It used to be called, the museum's exhibit was called The Last Man Hanged in Wood County. So up until 2015, from maybe, let's say it started around 1970, this exhibit, it was called The Last Man Hung in Wood County. And if you Google Weird Ohio, which which is a book about odd things in Ohio. This is featured. Go to the museum and see Mary's fingers, right? Sensationalism. So in 2015, they restored her fingers, but they also thought, how could we talk in a better way about what happened? And they retitled the exhibit in 2020, The Mary and Carl Bach Story. They also did a few changes. Instead of drawing on that sensational newspaper article that used termagant, virago, and slatterly and portrayed Mary with victim blaming, they relied on primary documentation, court testimonies, testigos, and life records instead of only that article. And Evers, by the way, the journalist, never even met the Bachs. He didn't know them personally, and yet he wrote in this way about them. The local historian at the museum in an article said that Mary had never been described in the local press as a daughter, sister, mother, wife, or murder victim, either in her own time or when her remains became a museum exhibit. So now they brought in domestic violence resources that are in the community, and they reframed it as this relationship story in the title, A Mary and Bach Story. The very last poem that I will read to you is about the artifact of her fingers. It's the only way that we know what happened to Mary. If these fingers hadn't been saved, as gruesome, disgusting as it is, we wouldn't know what happened. So there's always a good and a bad side to things. And in this poem, I talk about the value of those fingers. For the first 100 years, those fingers were in the courthouse on public display. Then they moved into the History Museum. This poem is called Evidence. Oh, 2 words. Knuckles, this is your knuckle. And the word holler, which is to shout, holler, H-O-L-L-E-R. Evidence. The fingers are withered, yellow, so that it's hard to tell where the nails are and where the knuckles are. For over 100 years, these fingers have lived at the county courthouse on public display. They have worked beyond their years, beyond their marrow. From the case, they holler at weeping women who fear for their lives to run. Take their lives and run, because that is all that matters. Not papers, deeds, money, valuables. Take your life and run. Thank you very much. I appreciate your attention. And if you have any questions, yeah, there's a lot more I can tell you or anything about writing and typing.
Questions, comments?
No todos a tiempo.
Are there any writers in the audience? Is there anybody that writes poetry or fiction?
No.
Is there anybody interested in domestic violence with law? Yes.
Well, actually, I do for the university about that, but now I just in second semester, so I start to how to investigate our system and
Good.
Ok, eso es todo.
Yes.
Like that they have info play on the child, not in the woman, because on the type of law, my favorite is the family, and because of my mother, and she worked in the Sept, I like that type of help to children.
So you're interested in family law? Yes, good. It's important.
what happened to the children.
Oh, this is interesting. Okay, so the children went to Lorain County. So it's halfway the distance towards Cleveland, and they lived with one of Mary Bach's brothers or sisters. And to this day, one of the relatives is in Boston and was brought or came to Bowling Green when they redid the exhibit in 2015, and she was very, I have not reached out to her about it. I also like to say I have poetry books, if you'd like, for sale, with Cash or Neki, Davi Plata, so Passion Seeds, and this This is love poetry, a long distance relationship. Any other questions?
What? Well,
Okay, thank you.
I was gonna say, the poetry is a lot about Ohio, oil, home. Maybe you can tell us a little about that.
Oh, well, actually, this book is about Ohio because the event takes place in Ohio, and so I concentrated on the event. Otherwise, the first book, it's based in location when I was in Ohio and my beloved was in Africa. So it has Ohio flowers and landscape, and then also African landscape. Otherwise, I think I read a lot about nature, but it's not so much about Ohio. But I
okay.
love my
What
state.
about the layout of your poetry? Does it kind of move left, right?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Yes, so I played around, I experimented with different forms, and I worked for a long time on this project. And I took a poetry workshop, and the leader of the workshop urged me to try what you call different containers for the poems. So one of those was, oh, let me put a poem in the form of a wanted ad. And then a friend of mine, so it's important if you're a writer to be with your friends who also write, she said, how about prayers? How about children's songs, clapping songs? Yes. And in the poem, they've all passed me by. It's kind of trying, I think, on the putting words on the left and the right to give a sense of feeling toward where you feel conflicted. And I believe that how things look on the page is important. I'm not a spoken word poet. Primarily I write, but I like to read with emotion. However, it's important to me how things look on the page. What's the last word on the line? And what words are emphasized? So we call it the line break, the last word on the line break, the title.
We saw there's one word that's on our list in the container that you have, engrossed.
Oh, sure, engrossed.
Did I say? Yeah, engrossed.
So when you're really interested, maybe you're engrossed in watching Premier Events on Netflix, right? You're watching it all the time.
Okay. You wanna-
And if you have any questions, feel free, you can come talk to me afterwards, don't be shy.
Have any of you listened to poetry, a recital like today in English? First time.
Oh, good. Well, there are many library or bookstores here that have readings, and I know how hard it is because I go to Spanish readings of poetry and I can't understand. So I was hoping, okay, at least a few copies would help. But there's a new bookstore called Ficciones that they have events every night, and in Spanish. You have a rich resource for writers here in Bogota. Many bookstores. A lot of our bookstores have been bought out. They have what we call folded, gone out of business because the big bookstores like Barnes and Noble or Amazon have put them out of business. Yeah,
Okay.
Any other questions?
Oh, yes, too.
Sure.
I have more personal question. Why did you decide to come to Colombia?
Oh, well, this man over here is the reason why I came
Nice.
over. So my boyfriend.
Hello.
Here, yes.
It's nice to meet you.
So he came. I
Thanks.
visited 5 times from 2022, and now we are living together.
Hi,
Yes.
hi.
So-
Nice to meet
Is
you.
he a poet too?
No, he's not a poet. No, but he was so helpful in translating these words, and so yes.
Thanks, my love.
But he studies German, so he's interested in the German words.
Okay, I know.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well,
Well,
thank you.
guys, before you leave, I'm gonna pass a little QR so you can scan it.
Oh, and I'm sorry, I wanted to tell you, here is my email address. Feel free to reach out to me. Okay, this is my email. And if you send me an email, I'll send you an electronic copy of my books on PDF. Okay, so, yeah.
Okay.
or why did you start about?
You know, and this is something I should have mentioned at the very beginning. So my mother suffered from domestic violence. It was really one main incident when I was in my teenage years. It was not an ongoing thing, but my father grabbed my mother by the throat. He pushed her in the wall. My mother filed probably a restraining order. The police came, they took photos. She had black and blue marks. And so I think probably I witnessed that when these things, when there are financial pressures, people stay. My mother stayed in this abusive relationship because my father said he wouldn't pay for college. And when my godparents asked the church for help, our local church, the priest said, we don't get involved. So it's really, so there is a personal connection as to why I'm interested in this. And I'm hoping too that sometimes we can't talk about our own stories, but if we have something else to look at, it can help us open up or to think about things. So I'm hoping that this could be a platform for awareness on domestic violence, opening discussion. And last year, the play, a 10-minute version, so about a quarter of the book, was performed in theater. And my dream would be to take it and that it could be performed and as an awareness event and open discussions. So if you perform at all, I don't know if you have a student theater group here, but feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to give you a copy if your students want to perform it or something.
Will be great.
And it sounds like we have a very bad storm coming, right? Yes.
Okay.
So I really appreciate your attention and your questions.
Thank you
I
very much.
wish you luck with your studies. And I remember hearing that your university is really strong in issues with gender. Yes, you have courses in gender, and so
Okay.
it's good to hear that. Thank you.
Bueno.
And again, if you have any